Ryan Hodson here, Airforce Velocity Stacks. I'd like to talk about the 500, my favorite bike. So there's a lot of confusion out there about this stack and what it does and how it works. And you know, when we first started doing this, I built hundreds of stacks, worked them on the flow bench with the throttle body, tried to figure out how to put more air into the engine, how to work it in combination with cams and get that horsepower result that we were looking for. So what happened was, when we first started out, I was, you know, in a big hurry to start getting stacks out there and, you know, trying to create some income. And we went out and we went to Neil's at NPP's and we went on his dyno. And I walked in there and I said, I got this stack and man, I think it's going to make a bunch of power. He says, well, how much power do you think it's going to make? I said, well, I think it's going to make 5 horsepower. And he looked at me and said, well, you know, I've been doing this my whole life, 5 horsepower, that's a lot of horsepower. And so we went up, we did our first dyno pull, and we were comparing it to a traditional snow bike intake. And, you know, the truth of the whole story is that on the whole bottom end, when I say 11 horsepower, the stack made 11 horsepower from the bottom to about 6,500 horsepower. And then from 6,500 horsepower, it made about 8, and then it probably made 8 to 5 for the rest of the whole power curve. And I went, oh my God, this is crazy. This is gonna be crazy. We're gonna sell so many of these things, it's gonna be nuts. Instantly went and got a stock bike, a stock 500. I'm like, I wonder what this stack will do on a 500, a stock bike. So we put it on the stock 500, and it made 5 horsepower right across the whole bottom. So I started thinking, well, why did my bike make that huge gain, and why did that 500 make 5? So still 5 horsepower gain was incredible. We were very happy with that. But what happened was, I realized that we needed to feed the cam. The cam needed to be fed. We got a high compression piston in here, a 14-to-1 piston, crawler cam, and Jeff from PR2 did the tuning on the ECU. And that was it. So this bike ended up, when I took it to the dyno, it started off at 56 horsepower. It left at 60, right? So the top number went up. That was the top numbers, 56 and 60. But the whole bottom end was just ginormous. I mean, it was up 11 horsepower. So from there, I'm like, okay, well, we got to start field testing these. And I got my group of guys together and we went up and down the logging roads with the stack on. And we had this instantly the next weekend on about 10 bikes, and we were going all over the place. And every one of those guys said, you know, on the logging road, you really can't feel anything. But when you make the motor work, wow, when you're up high, I'm always riding 1 gear taller. And so if a guy's riding 1 gear taller on a 450 or a 500, it means the stack works, right? So I looked at my buddy. The next weekend, he's riding his 500. I'm like, what are you doing riding your 500? He's like, well, you know, man, this bike's a lot of fun now. He says, it just got a lot of roll on throttle, a lot of response. It's so much funner. We go out again, he's got his 500, leaving his 490 at home. So we go out again, he's riding his 500. So finally, I'm like, okay, we got to get you back on your 490. Let's design a stack for the 490. And there she went. We're on to the 490s. But so anyways, for installing this stack, what happens is it's very, very simple. I would say it's like level 1, right? You take the existing hose clamp off. You can use the existing hose clamp. This is for your map sensor, your cold air sensor, right? And the flat part of the stack here, that goes against the strut rod. I was out in the mountains and these guys were messing around with their engine, and they had one of my stacks on there, and it kept falling off, and I couldn't figure it out. It's on all these bikes, but why is it falling off? And I went and I looked, and they had the stack on upside down, and because they figured that the cord wasn't long enough to plug in the map sensor, they stuck it upside down. And what was happening is that these ribs on here were vibrating against the timber sled strut rod, and was just kind of vibrating and pulling it off. But for the other 1,000 guys, they put it on this way and they don't fall off. I was pretty stressed out hearing that the stacks were falling off, but yeah, they don't fall off. So it's pretty simple. It fits right up in there. It doesn't rub on the plastic. And if it does rub on the plastic, you can slide this forward or backwards in these different grooves, right? And it's pretty basic. It just sits right in there, easy to install. We don't have any problems with it. I don't tie my filters on with a zip tie, but if you want, go ahead. People do. They're worried about snow getting in there. There hasn't been any issues that I know of at this time with you know, any of the outerwears. I think the design is good. Outerwears has been working with me on this design. We've changed it about 30 times. We've changed this cage about 30 times, trying to make everything right so it's better for the customer. Thanks for listening.